Well, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in this world, or maybe when you're watching this thing. Always good to be here. I'm actually really excited about our webinar today because this really is about meeting the experts, right? Talking to our experts. A lot of times you guys see myself, you see Giancarlo, but today you get to meet Bobby. The hope is that Lorenzo is going to be able to join us here. He was intended to be here, but he ended up having some issues that he is dealing with. So if he can join us, great. If you can't, then you get to listen to Giancarlo and I answer some of the questions that he often gets. So Giancarlo, you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you again. And as JB was mentioning, if Lorenzo is going to join soon, I will leave the stage to Lorenzo. Otherwise, I will answer on his behalf. Thanks, JB.
Very good. Bobby, welcome to our webinars. Introduce yourself. Tell people like what you do at Domotz.
Happy to be doing this. I take on kind of an account specialist and sales engineering type role. So I'm kind of one of the main points of contact for new and existing users to get more familiar with Domotz and really kind of get as much value out of it as possible.
Bobby, you're selling yourself short. Let's be honest, man. You do a lot of things here, right? You help answer a lot of questions. I see you on the Zendesk, right? Our platform for answering a lot of technical support questions as well. You help out our support guys, but you also do a lot of the onboarding, and I completely appreciate that. Lorenzo, oh, by the way, Bobby, I should point out that you're based in North America, right? You and I are both in the same office here in the Salt Lake City area, Mountain Time. So I know you and I get to work closely together with a lot of these things. Lorenzo, who we wanted to introduce, and again, I'm hoping that he's able to join us, but if not, as Giancarlo said, he'll fill in. But it's important to note that Lorenzo is based in Italy, so he covers our European side of things, but he works very closely on the customer success side. So making sure that all of our customers, really covering whether it's Europe or North America, but if there's ever issues with respect to onboarding, if there are technical questions that come up, Lorenzo's there to help our sales team as well. So hopefully he's able to join us. Let me talk to you a little bit about why we wanted to do this. So Giancarlo and I often talk about a lot of the new features and things that come out, but we started seeing more and more common questions that we get asked, whether it's on the support forums or whether it's during onboarding calls. So we decided to reach out to Bobby, we decided to reach out to Lorenzo both and say, hey, what are some of the common questions that we get and how can we present those to you guys, as our customers, in a way that may make sense to at least understand what are the common questions, what are the pitfalls, what are some of the things that you guys have to deal with, and let's get some answers to those. I chose to frame these questions up kind of in 3 different parts, and I wrote down a lot of these questions because we had a lot of them, and I think there are a lot of good ones. I chose to put these into kind of what are the sales and business related ones, so we'll address those at first. And I think we'll just touch on a few of these because most of you that are watching here understand Domotz at this point, but I still want to address some of these for our newcomers. We'll then talk a little bit about some of the onboarding questions, right? What are some of the things that are good practices for you to do when you are first installing Domotz, or when you're first installing an agent? What are some of the things you should be thinking about? And then we'll get to some more of the advanced questions. Now, that being said, this is a live webinar. As you know, we are always very open to the common questions that you have. We've got some team members standing by that will address some of those questions as well. So please use the chat window or the questions window in the GoToWebinar control panel. With that being said, I think plenty of people have joined in. Let's get started with some of these questions. Bobby, I want to address some of these questions to you initially because you do a lot of sales related questions along with some of our other team members. A few things that came up from you in particular. First of all, how quickly can somebody get Domotz set up, right? When they get started, what is the, I guess, the expected onboarding time, and how do you often address that question?
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of situations, once we get through the initial demo and Q&A sessions, the actual setup of new agents, I feel it takes anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour at first as people get more familiar with Domotz and understand how to set up devices and add VLANs and add the alerts to devices and things like that. So I think once they get through the initial roadblocks, they should be able to cut that down to realistically maybe 30 minutes, because then it's basically mass applying credentials or alerts or whatever it may be. And so the setup time really shouldn't be extremely time consuming, and any new users should be able to pick it up pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Bobby. I mean, first of all, the team has done we've tried to do a really good job to make sure that the setup time is quick, it's easy, right? The activation of the agent is pretty fast. Once you've done it once or twice, I would say it's really quick. So I tend to agree with that. Now, another question that we often get with respect to this is that people are often evaluating, or maybe they've had a network monitoring platform before, and now they want to kind of change over to Domotz, whether it's for pricing reasons or whatever. I think the question sometimes comes up of what are the changeover costs associated with this, right? What are the barriers of entry, or how am I going to migrate what I'm doing today into Domotz? I mean, do you get that question a lot, and how do you address that?
I get it pretty often, and I think one of the things I try to get every new user to do is come up with a list of some of the most common things you're using your current tools for, and then we go through and figure out how exactly we need to do that in Domotz and what's a good process to go through to make sure we can do it efficiently and not spend too much time on it. And I think another big thing that comes up is integrations with different tools, the ticketing systems, PSA tools, documentation tools. A lot of those are already integrated with their current network monitoring tool. So getting through kind of those integration setup steps, making sure everything's mapped properly and alerts are in place that you need. I think those are all things that, depending on how we can work together, it can be kind of a time-consuming task, but as long as we have kind of a good plan in place, that should be something that's not extremely time-consuming and is really easy to accomplish.
I would take the opportunity to point out that, Bobby, you and Lorenzo in particular, right? But we've also got Rory on our helpline that is there to help with that. In fact, within the last few months, we've created an actual customer success team, which the whole intention is to really help people with onboarding and helping address some of these questions, right? Whether it's integrations or changeovers. So yeah, I want people to know that we're there, and that, regardless of their situation, you're going to help them figure out the best solution in order to make that happen. So it's good. Another question that we often get, because some of our customers are worried about how they're going to I guess I'd say grow with Domotz, right? The question often is, how do we scale? How do you address that?
I think one of the biggest things I'd point out is the ease of setup. That this is not a tool that you need to have somebody that their sole job is setting up Domotz and maintaining it, like you can see with other tools out there. This is something that level 1, level 2 techs, they should be pretty comfortable with and be able to set up and onboard new clients pretty easily. And I think that also kind of leads into the pricing side of things, where the pricing model makes this extremely scalable. They know MSPs, integrators, they know the costs that are going to be incurred for the network monitoring tool, regardless of the type of clients that they might be onboarding. But I'd say ease of setup is really one of the biggest things when it comes to scalability, and also deployment options, being really flexible and being able to deploy to virtual machines or NAS drives or Raspberry Pis or the Domotz box. There's a lot more options that you just can't really find with a lot of other tools. So it makes things a lot easier from a deployment point of view.
That's such a true statement. And I think one of the things that kind of leads into the next question anyway, which is about, kind of that per site model and the pricing. I think the flexibility that Domotz has there really does help you scale effectively. One of the very common questions that we get, especially when we're dealing with somebody new, is, what does it mean on a per site basis, right? And how is that different than others? I mean, when you talk about sites, what do you say to our customers?
I think the best way of thinking about it is site, location, building, whatever word you want to use. Just think of it like an individual office building where you may have a client with 3 offices. That'd be 3 unique sites that you'd want to deploy the Domotz agent or collector to. So think of it as physical locations or addresses. Some people I talk to think of it as each firewall that they're monitoring or managing is a site that they deploy Domotz to.
Yeah, and it really is meant to be simple. Of course, there's always a difference between what do we say from a marketing perspective and then how do things get implemented technically. One thing that I always want to point out is that when we talk about a per site, we often think about a network, right? But that network, right, these agents, these collectors, as we're calling them now, can look across multiple VLANs. It can look across multiple subnets. So depending on the complexity of the network, right, that's really how you're going to define the site to you. Would you agree with that, Bobby?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's something that gets brought up pretty often, and at the end of the day, it's that per site model, not so much per subnet or VLAN, because I get that question all the time, but really just each address that you need to monitor.
Yeah, very physical address, right? Not IP address. Yeah, very good. So another question that I want to ask, and it kind of leads to this notion of sites. A lot of service providers in particular are worried about this, but it's multi-tenancy, right? And what does it mean to be multi-tenant? I mean, how do you address that with the questions? And this is going to start to lead into some of the more onboarding questions, I think. But what is multi-tenancy to you, and how do you describe that?
Really being able to have a system where you can really see everything in one place. You don't have to log into different portals or different dashboards. If you wanted to see a global view of all your clients and their devices, you have that option in the Domotz dashboard. So I think being able to have all of your different sites in, I don't like the catchphrase or whatever you want to call it, but single pane of glass. But that's really what you have, is you have a single pane of glass to see all of your different sites you're monitoring, all their devices, and any metrics or issues that are out there.
Yeah, single pane of glass. It's funny that you have kind of a visceral reaction to that. I think it was an overused term quite a while ago. And look, the reality of what we've done, right, is for network monitoring, right, and bringing in all sorts of different systems, whether they're different types of hardware, different types of services that are running, right, we do want to bring that into our platform. In my mind, it's about making it easy for the service provider to use Domotz as a tool that helps them scale, right? And that what that means is making it easy to integrate into the platforms that they care about, whether it's their PSA tool or the ticketing system, whatever it is that they use in order to. Very good. Hey, I want to get off of some of these kind of more salesy related questions and get into a little bit more of the onboarding stuff now. So Giancarlo, I want you to help, and Bobby, all of us need to have some discussions on this part now. So when it comes to onboarding, okay, when somebody first installs an agent that's out there, actually even before the agent, let's talk about the account. Right? What is some of the best practices for configuring the account? And Bobby, I want to go to you first with this, but then I want Giancarlo to also chime in from like the customer success point of view, or even the help desk support point of view.
I would say best practices to start out with, not so much the agent level, the account level, would be determining what you think of as kind of an important device, because we have that important device classification, and I kind of want to dig into that a little bit, but everybody may have a different idea on what an important device is to them. Some people may manage printers, others might manage just networking devices, others just servers. Everybody's a little bit different. So I think figuring out what you deem as an important device is a good thing to to initially cover, because then you can decide, do you want to use the Domotz automatic classification, or do you want to turn that off and you specify how you use that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to focus on important devices in a minute, right? Because I think that's a big question that we get, and I know Giancarlo and I just this last week have had probably no less than 3 or 4 people ask about how to turn classification off. But Giancarlo, first on the onboarding side, what do you recommend, or what's your thought?
And this goes in the direction of answering one of the questions we just received from Michael. Is I'm pretty new to the tool, and I was looking for some classes or academics or academy library of videos, so on. And so I would recommend starting with 2 entry points. One is in the user guide, we provide an onboarding section with few articles, very quick to read, and few articles to onboard new users and from the user new sites. And the other thing, the other libraries that I want to share, and we can probably put a link in the mail of recap, basically, is the Domotz Academy YouTube libraries. We have a 101 section, which is covering basically the base of the Domotz usage. We will add more and more 201 videos there to go, let's say, an advanced level. So that's something that I would like to share.
Okay, yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, the Domotz Academy, I'm going to give kudos to our marketing team, right? They've done a great job of putting together quick, easy to watch, right? Bite-sized chunk libraries of videos, and they're very relevant to the topics you care about, right? You don't have to watch them all the way through. You can skip to the ones you want. We're continuing to add those too. I know that some of our team members like Rory are putting together some of the main topics that we see and creating them into academies. So that's a great point. Giancarlo, I think it's worthwhile to talk about help.domotz.com at this point, because first and foremost on the point of onboarding, and Bobby, I have to imagine that you send people to the onboarding guides that are on help.domotz.com. Is that correct?
Yeah. Pretty much every single meeting, I'm sending at least 2 or 3 different links to different guides.
Yeah, okay. So if you guys go to help.domotz.com, I think the very first link, if I'm not mistaken, is onboarding guides. And I think we have 2 or 3 that talk about setting up your account, configuring it so that you are, thinking about your team members, but then it also goes into some of the alerts, right, that you need to be thinking about. Before we get to alerts, and Bobby, you brought this up, and I want to touch on it. Important devices, okay? Tell me again, Bobby, what you recommend with respect to important devices.
Honestly, I usually recommend disabling the automatic important device classification, mainly because, like I was saying earlier, everybody has a different idea of what's important. There's situations, types of devices that are important, or maybe it's just a list of devices on different VLANs or whatever it may be. Everybody's so different in that way that I always recommend disabling it, so that way they can kind of clean up what we might have already marked as important, and then they mark as whatever should be important as important.
So, and if I remember correctly, let me go into my account section here. Hopefully you guys can see my desktop. I don't know that a lot of people realize that they can actually disable the way in which we do classification of important devices. And this has been a topic of conversation that I know Giancarlo and I have had. If you go to portal.domotz.com and go to your settings, okay, you'll have this tab under the services section that's called automatic important devices classification. You can then come in here and manage the settings, right? You can absolutely just disable this so that Domotz won't do anything with any devices. And then, of course, if it's disabled, right, you can then go into your inventory dashboards and you can select the devices you care about. You can filter by, let's just say, manage switches if that's what you want to do. And then you can set that important tag for all the systems you care about. The other thing you can do is have this only happen once when it does the first scan, and then you can go and turn off things. Giancarlo, I've got to ask you, All right, can you give us a little bit of background on why we automatically set to always use classifications? And then, yeah, go ahead.
And what we will do next. Yeah, absolutely. So this automatism in place behind the recognition of what we consider important device, it was an attempt to be how to say, the jack of all trades kind of behavior. So to Bobby's point, regardless the user, we mark a printer as well as a NAS, as well as a switch, or router, a firewall, but even some TVs as important. Why is that? Because TV might be important for a scenario where there is a digital signal wall, or a conference room where the TV status is important, as well as a printer might be important for a printing house. So, but we recognize that, and to Bobby's point again, we recognize that this might not fit all the needs. So it's good to have that automatism in place.
Yeah.
So that user get to know the tag of important device, because it guides the but to JB's point, you can disable it, or you can enable just for the first scan, which means you install a new agent in a new site, everything pop-ups. We try to identify as much as possible the important device. And then that's it. I mean, it will be up to you to mark the device as important or not.
Yeah.
Now,
go ahead, Giancarlo.
The future will be allowing every single user to define which category of types of devices they consider as important, so that if you're a print house, you only mark the printers as important. If you are managing conference room or digital signage, you put the TVs, you put the audio video devices, and so on. If you are only managing the network, you put just the switches, router, firewall. So that will be the idea for the future, to allow users to tag automatically devices with the important based on the type they care.
Yeah, very good. I think you touched on a key point, which is why we did this, right? It really is for ease of use and understanding the value of Domotz and seeing what it can do. But when you become a power user of Domotz, there's no doubt in my mind that you want to disable this now. I like the idea of creating templates and making it easy for people that are power users to have these things kind of automatically discover the systems that they care about. So it's important to note that we're going that way. So yeah, Bobby, I totally hear what you're saying about the whole disabling and why you do that, because you're often dealing with people that are kind of getting into the whole process. And from an onboarding point of view, it makes sense. Let's talk about alerts a little bit, Bobby. So from an alert perspective, what do you often recommend that people do, especially at the beginning?
The first one is going through one of the onboarding guides, because there's a section in one of them that I basically wrote up a recommendation on how to use shared alerts initially, just to hopefully get people to understand the way they should be thinking about them, and not necessarily creating a shared alert for every type of event, for every type of different device. But being able to just separate things between like agent or network events and device specific events, and being able to massify those from there pretty easily. And I think some of the good ones to at least start out with are the agent or sites being up and down, and device discovery is a really good one. And then more on the device level, the device up and down, and maybe heartbeat loss. I'm a little cautious when I recommend that, just because it can be pretty noisy, but it is really good for like high availability types of devices and critical systems. And then I think another one would be the security ones, seeing if there's open ports on the gateway or if UPnP is enabled. And I think starting out with just those initially gives users a good understanding of some of the high level alerts they can be getting, and then from there getting into the more granular ones that are maybe through SNMP or TCP or however they need to go about it.
Yeah, Giancarlo, what's your thoughts?
I'm in agreement with the Bobby. The first step is to set the alerts at the agent level, especially the agent offline. It's something that's everybody usually, I mean, whoever comes in Domotz at the beginning, they forget to set an alert on Domotz agent status. So if the collector goes down and you don't have the alert on that collector, I mean, the collector is not monitoring anything else. Okay, so that's the first and most important thing. The other concept is, and this goes in the direction of answering one question from Chris about how easy it is to apply shared alerts to multiple devices at once. And one of the capability of the inventory dashboard is the capability of selecting multiple devices based on your rules. So you can filter by type, you can filter by the importance, if you care about the importance, if you can filter by the site that you care, and then you can use the multi-select field there. And on the right side, yeah, by the time the filter does,
How about I go to a site that has actual equipment?
Yeah, so by using the multi-select fields there, you can select 2, 3, all of them. There is on the right tab, there are the shortcut to apply to all of those devices some properties, including the shared alert profile. So once you create a shared alert profile which is triggered, for instance, when the device goes up and down, or if you're monitoring SNMP on that device, or if you're monitoring ports, TCP ports on that device. Once you have created a profile and the profile is linked to a contact channel, then to link to massively to a lot of devices, this is the fastest approach. So selecting multi-select from the inventory dashboard and then apply the profile. The multi-select is available at the agent level, no, the devices within the same agent, but I would recommend the inventory dashboard for that.
Absolutely. I mean, Giancarlo, and this gets back to that question that we asked Bobby at the beginning, which is, scalability. Right? It's one thing, and we kind of address scalability from how do you quickly deploy when I have 30, 50, 100 customers already. But as you add customers, right, you want to be able to quickly apply these templates, if you will, to those new agents that get deployed. And you want to do it quickly. And you can do that through these inventory dashboards, whether, again, you're looking at the inventory from the site level or you're looking at the device level. So it's good. Bobby, I wanted to point out, we often get questions about, first of all, the collector. That's exactly right, to put an alert on that. But the other thing that you mentioned, and I want to kind of counter what you said, which is that heartbeat lost, right? That, to your point, that brings up a lot of noise. And I think it's very important that people recognize that if you're just looking for online, offline status, stay away from that heartbeat lost and go towards the, please go to, oops, wrong page, but go towards the device up or device down, right? Because that is a much better indication, especially when you're dealing with wireless devices, right? And you care about that. So good. Okay, a little bit more of a technical question. This is still kind of on the onboarding side, but we get this a lot, Bobby, and I want to know how you address this. The collector type. I think you mentioned, and you're exactly right. In fact, if I go to this add a site, people will see this. I mean, we've got, what, 17 or 18 different ways of installing a collector, right? An agent. Windows is by far the most common because it's easy to deploy and people can test it. But when it comes to actual usage and, again, scalability, we have a lot of options. How do you talk to customers about what's the best to choose, Bobby?
I think the number one thing I tell everybody to, I guess, be mindful of is do what's going to be most convenient for you, because there's options for pretty much any kind of a host out there. And don't try to jump through a bunch of hoops to spin up a new host or go buy a bunch of new hardware just to host the Domotz collector. We have tons of options out there. And I feel like in a lot of cases, people end up moving towards the virtual machine agents. And I think this is a good point that a lot of MSPs bring up to me is it's a little bit easier to use a VM in multi-VLAN environments because they maybe the host is configured to look at all the VLANs, but maybe the agent or collector itself shouldn't be looking at everything. Maybe ignore the guest VLAN or the point of sale VLAN, but then they can just use virtual NICs to assign the exact VLANs they want the collector to be looking at. And it's a little bit easier with a virtual machine than with some of the other options out there, depending on how tech savvy you are. But I really like the VM approach, but when it comes down to it, it's really just what's the most convenient for you, what's the easiest, and what host do you have out there, really.
Yeah. Bobby, I'm curious. So I know you're fairly technical and you talked about the VMs. As we mentioned before, when this collector is deployed, we can look at different VLANs, we can look at different subnets, but VLANs are where we start to have some challenges with the collector versus host that it's on. How do you address those, and what do you suggest to people if they do want to look at multiple VLANs?
Well, we have a lot of really good help guides on the VLAN configuration for all the different deployment options, and they're pretty comprehensive, go through the exact steps you need to follow. But what I tell everybody is if you feel like it's taking too long, you're running into issues or have questions, don't try to figure it all out. Just reach out to us. You can reach out to me, the rest of the customer success team, the support team. We're here and happy to help, and we want it to be an easy and painless onboarding process. It shouldn't be something that is too difficult by any means. So just reach out to us, and we're happy to help.
Good.
Maybe with regards to choosing the right collector hardware or host for the collector, I want to address one of the questions we received at the beginning of the webinar today, and this is probably just to cover some of the questions. So Dean was asking, one issue we face with deployment is with the retail environment. We really don't have an extra hardware in these sites, but we want to use Domotz to monitor printers, point of sales, security camera, and so on. So how do we address this scenario, such as the retail space? And I would like to say, this is definitely one of our best use cases. We have several companies in the retail space. Majority of them, they've chosen to deploy the Domotz box or the Protectly hardware for the exact same reason. You don't have an hardware on the remote store, for instance. You just configure the Domotz box or the Protectly hardware in the office, you ship to the store, they just plug in the store. That's it. You have an entire store of the retail chain, monitor it. And there was a use case a couple of years ago about a restaurant chain in US. It was a very small IT company behind that restaurant chain. They had 200 fast food shops. They configured the 200 boxes in the office. They shipped in one day. They had everything monitored.
Yeah.
All the so which was, I mean, just speaking about cost saving, it's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars saved by that.
Yeah, and Giancarlo, to your point, right? Domotz has a box built on Ubuntu Core, right? And it's available on Amazon. It's $140 if I remember correctly. I really like this Protectly box. This is a new product that or a group that we've been working with. Essentially, they're creating Intel-based solutions that have multiple ports, which I think when people see this with the multiple ports, that probably gets them a little bit excited. The reason is you can now use this in air-gapped situations. You can use this to monitor multiple VLANs, kind of independent. And quite honestly, for the $240, right, $100 more, I think that this solution is extremely powerful. They use tools like Core Boot to keep security in there, and it's an Intel-based platform. And Giancarlo, one of the things that often we get, especially in larger networks, is when people are using things like SNMP v3 that uses encryption, if they're wanting to do higher performance speed testing, this solution is a much better path. So I'm glad you brought up the hardware.
Thanks, Ruby.
So great. So another question on the onboarding side. This gets to monitoring dashboards. So Bobby, I'd like to understand from your perspective, first of all, I guess when people start, when they've already dove into Domotz, they've decided to use us as a tool for them. They want to figure out how to take advantage of these dashboards in the best way. What do you recommend? How do you guide people on how to best use the dashboards?
Yeah, I'd say with starting out with the monitoring dashboards, I usually recommend starting with the connectivity, status, and uptime one, just because it gives them good information on, let's say, important devices or just networking devices. For status, round-trip delay information like latency and packet loss, the uptime percentage of devices over the last day, week, and month. I think that's a really good one to start with. That isn't too granular and just has a lot of information in there that people might just ignore. I think that's a really good one to start with, but I usually recommend starting out with a static version of that so they can see what that looks like, and maybe just do, let's say, a couple switches, maybe a couple of servers, printers, and just keep it somewhat limited just until they understand kind of how it works and how they may want to implement it. But then the next one I usually recommend doing is a dynamic dashboard for, let's say, their most important devices, let's say servers. And maybe just doing the, let's say you got the list there, like the disk information. That's a really good one, where if a new server comes online and matches the parameters set in that dynamic filter, it gets the physical disk information out of it and puts it in that table too. So that way, when you're onboarding new sites, it automatically gathers those details, puts in this single table, and then you have more of a centralized view of things. You're not having to bounce around from agent to agent and device to device too much, and just have a single place to look at your most important systems.
Yeah. Do you often get people asking about how can I use these on a, say, per customer basis versus like looking at kind of all the systems holistically? Do you talk about that?
I do, and it's honestly a little bit of a loaded question just because everybody's a little bit different, where some people want a table with, let's say, every switch and firewall and access point, all networking devices for all their clients in one table, which you can do, but I usually recommend breaking it up by clients, just because you can have, let's say, like on that left side, the dashboards, have a dashboard for each one of your clients, and then within the tables for each types of devices that are most important to you. But I do think having kind of one giant NOC dashboard isn't necessarily a bad thing, because then you have the simple or simpler look of the Sites Explorer to see high-level things if there's important devices that are down. But then at the monitoring dashboard level, you can see the actual metrics that could be pointing to those types of issues.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, which is, and it is a loaded question, you're right, and you answered it well. It really depends on how you as a service provider are configured with your support team, how you are managing your customers, what SLAs you have in place, and what's your expectations. I love the fact that each user can have their own individual dashboard for the things that they care about. So let's take a fictitious example, but if you've got a networking expert that wants to check the status of all of the network infrastructure devices, you can do that. And if you want to filter it or create a separate table by firewalls, by managed switches, by access points, you can do that, which I really, really like. Giancarlo, you and I have been talking about this. I'm showing it now. Do you want to speak to some of the things that we're improving? Which this isn't meant to be a feature thing, but this is kind of cool, and I think people will really like this. So this is another powerful way to use the dashboards.
Thanks, GB, for dropping that to me. So as Bobby has mentioned so far, the monitoring dashboard and monitoring tables are the cardinality of the tables is basically one device per row. And this is up until now with this beta feature that you're showing, where here the table is based on the list of devices. So, sorry, the list of collectors. So one row is one site or one network. And then we are trying to add parameters that have troubleshooting network issues, like a bottleneck because there is a device causing a lot of DHCP requests, or an issue with loops, we will be able to identify loops and notify the loops on the network through this table, and alerting behind the table. Identification of IP conflicts. So we will be able to identify if two different devices are collapsing on the same IP address, which means you're going to have an issue on those devices. And JB, you had an issue with Spot on your network last week. Yeah.
Let me tell you what it was, Giancarlo. I had we had a power outage, and then when the system came back, I had a remote control that was on Wi-Fi that was conflicting with a UPS on the IP address, and lo and behold, right, this table immediately showed it when the power all came back and everything stabilized. Two things happened. One is this IP conflict went to true. The other thing that happened is my wife was complaining about how she couldn't turn on the TV. And using this information, I was able to see, oh, it's these two devices, this UPS and this Wi-Fi remote, and I changed it.
Funny story, during the weekend, I had a similar issue with my iRobot. The robot that cleaned the house, it was colliding the IP address with my son's iPhone that he set the static IP address on the phone. Yeah, so the issue, so this robot doesn't work if there is no Wi-Fi, which is weird anyway, but it was stopping in the middle of the room like that, with no other message. It was not connected, so you could not provide any message, and we discovered through Domotz. So that's a nice thing. On top of that, other troubleshooting information like the buffer bloat, we will provide explanation of buffer bloat, but basically it's a measure for the quality of service of a network, in how the network can handle a loaded buffer on that when communicated outside. So that's cool stuff. This is in beta. It's available to whoever is part of the channel program, so the Domotz channel program partnership in beta. And our forecast is to have this open to everybody by first meet of December. So you still need to apply for the channel program.
I'm super excited about some of those additional network diagnostic capabilities. Let's move on here. Bobby, one of the things that we always get, right, is, and I'll go to my place here, the quote unquote IoT lab. It is the network topology map. Okay, when people are first installing Domotz, they will they'll often see this network topology tab, but then there's nothing in it, right? How do they get to where they have this stuff showing? How do you guide them through this?
I think the first thing is VLANs. Any VLANs you're wanting us to look at and to include in the network map need to be configured properly. But I think that one of the most important pieces is for your networking devices, your switches, your firewalls, make sure we have the SNMP community strings for those. So that's really that's really what's going to be doing the bulk of the work to get the port mapping, figuring out exactly how devices are connected. And once they get through that, we basically take care of the rest. We'll build it out automatically, update it if there's any changes. So it's not something that a lot of work needs to be done or a lot of manual connections need to be made. It's a pretty easy setup process once those first two steps are done.
Yeah, so first and foremost, especially with the network infrastructure, ensuring that Domotz has the SNMP community strings, right? Whether you're using, V3 or V2, right? Making sure you add that into the Domotz platform is step number one. But then I would also point out for firewalls, routers, managed switches, if you have things, oops, excuse me, I didn't mean to close that, but if you have like the HTTP or SSH authentications put in there, we can then go a little bit deeper as well to not only do the mapping, but that's when we can start doing configuration backups and making sure that those systems are there. Giancarlo, what's your thoughts on this with respect to the topology app? I know we see that in the support line all the time.
Correct. So starting from what Bobby recommended, enable SNMP, making sure that the switches support RFC 4188, which is the first let's say, protocol that we use for trying to map how devices are connected to each other. We also rely on LLDP and CDP data, again, through SNMP, again, through the network switches. And on top of that, we recognize where there is an access point, Wi-Fi access point connected to the switch. And the idea is that automatically the Wi-Fi devices connected to the access point are, let's say, routed to the switch through the access point. But in some cases, like Meraki access point or Ubiquiti access point or Ragos access point, we have an advanced monitoring where we do know exactly which client is connected to which access point, on which channel, which signal level, and so on. So in that case, the topology is even more powerful. So we don't make up stuff. It's just what we can collect from the network. So if we are not able to collect information, we're not going to show anything. If we are able to collect some of the information, we start figuring out how the device can be connected to each other and try to make that topology. But this is, at certain point, there is a sort of guessing. I mean, if, just to give an example, if the port 3 of the switch shows as connected devices 100 different devices, that's because that's the information that we got from the switch. That it's because the switch says on port 3 I can reach these 100 devices. So that's what we will show. We will show on port 3 100 devices, but you will be able to manually link which is the physical device there. For instance, if you have an unmanaged switch that doesn't appear on the network, it does not have an IP address on the network, you might create that dummy device or unmanaged switches there, connect to the port 3, and then all the other devices will show below that unmanaged switch. I don't know if that perhaps has a...
Yeah, and Carlo, actually what I'm showing here is an example of this. This happens to be a device that is an amplifier that has 3 endpoints within it. It has an unmanaged switch in it, but you can see from the devices page that it is, whoops, let me get this out of the way so I can close this real quick. You can see that it thinks it's seeing 3 devices, right? We can then come in here and set up an unmanaged switch if we want so that it shows properly if we want to do that. So just an example there. Okay, Bobby, you mentioned VLANs, right? And subnets and setting that stuff up first. And that actually gets to some of one of our more advanced questions that I want to touch on here. So talk to me about how we recommend people using VLANs versus routed networks, and what can you explain also the differences between those? And while you do that, I'm going to go show from the inventory tab kind of what we're talking about here. So here's an example where, like on my network, we're using mostly routed networks, I believe, when it comes up. But go ahead, Bobby, tell us the differences between these two.
Yeah, so with routed networks and VLANs, the way I describe it to a lot of people during onboarding calls is you have 2 different options when it comes to the deployment of Domotz. Where the first one, let's say you have a client with 3 office buildings, no VPN connections in place, or maybe they do, but you'd put an agent or collector at each of those 3 locations. For each of the VLANs there, go through those steps where the host is on a trunk port that can see those VLANs. And the benefit of that is we can get that layer 2 information and properly map everything on our backend, like the SNMP database and integrations to devices, and include them in the network topology maps for each site. So you get, I like to say, you pretty much get all the bells and whistles if you get the VLAN configuration option. The other option is with the routed networks. Let's say, using the same example, you have a client with 3 office buildings, all connected through VPNs, SD-WANs, whatever it may be. Put a collector in the main site or headquarters, add the other 2 sites with the routed networks. And with that, you're doing just layer 3 monitoring, just real basic IP address monitoring for the most part. So the way I think of it and try to explain it is the routed networks are great for satellite sites, small offices where it just doesn't make sense to put a collector, but you want basic information. But if you're needing everything, the network map, as much information as possible, all the fun stuff, it's best to put an agent at that site and do the the attached networks, like you see there, the VLAN configuration steps.
Bobby, you mentioned a couple things there that I think are important to note, especially for service providers who are dealing with customers that have multiple sites, right? Whether it's a dentist office or it's just a larger customer that has remote locations or satellite offices. Often those things are connected through a VPN, right? And the most basic VPN is actually a layer 3 technology. So it's really just IP address based connections. How do people configure the Domotz agents for those multiple sites? Right? How do they test across that VPN connection?
They also, this is a good question, because it also addressed one question from one of the users on the webinar. John was asking exactly the same thing.
Oh, okay, great. Have at it, Bobby. Answer John's question.
So, and I'm pulling up his question right now because I want to make sure I answer that correctly. So, the way I usually explain it to people is, if you're putting an agent at the main site or headquarters, need to monitor, let's say, 2 or 3 other dentist offices. GB, actually, it'd be nice if you kind of drilled it or add one of those routed networks there, just so
I don't know.
kind of see how that works. But basically, you can add that VPN connection in there, and we'll do the discovery as we would if the network is local to the agent. We'll pick up whatever's out there, and again, it's more basic IP address monitoring, the up and down status. You can set alerts, remote connections, and SNMP if you need to set up individual sensors and metrics on things. But Giancarlo, is there anything else that you wanted to kind of point out when monitoring those types of connections?
No, that's basically the trick, and you can, I mean, as far as you are good to monitor in layer 3, that's a way to monitor the, let's say, the 2 or 3 additional buildings that you might have for a specific customer. However, if you need more information like the MAC address, and you need to go to the layer 2 information, unless you have a layer 2 VPN, there are some, unless you have that kind of technology, our recommendation is usually having one Domotz collector per site or per building that you want to.
And I would point out, Giancarlo, right, the benefit of doing these routed networks, especially across multiple sites, is really setting up things like round trip delay, looking at latency, right, verifying, from one site to another that I can see that connection and I can set alerts, right? It's about proactive monitoring of those sites. To the point you made earlier, Bobby, about attached networks, right, and why you would want to have a Domotz agent physically on the VLAN, that's it, right, the layer 2. It's really about discovery of new devices. It's about classification and inventory management. From a CIS controls perspective, having an agent at each site really gives you the capability of understanding exactly what systems are there and making sure that your, I'm going to say cyber hygiene footprint stays secure, right?
Exactly.
Good. I want to talk about, because we only have a few minutes left, we're starting to get more and more questions about custom scripts and how people can get deeper integrations. And Giancarlo, I want to go to you first, and then Bobby, I want you to touch on some of the things that you've done for a couple of people and give some examples. So Giancarlo, what's your thoughts on custom scripts? And by the way, I want to point out that we got a question specifically around something like Zigbee and Z-Wave and whether we can monitor those. And this is probably the way to do it, right, Giancarlo?
Yeah, that's a correct statement, JP. So around 1.5 years ago, we introduced this new framework, which allows every user to write their own scripts in a kind of simple JavaScript language, where the Domotz collector is able to interrogate every single device on the network, or even interrogate a cloud-based service and extract information from the service or extract information from the device and report this information into the Domotz cloud. And you can put this information at the device level or in a monitoring dashboard to have all the values for whatever you want to monitor in a somehow organized way. And through the means of this custom script, we have developed a custom script that helps monitoring Zigbee devices through, for instance, Control4 controller or Z-Wave device through other controller, even Crestnet device through Crestron. So there are multiple custom scripts for doing what Alex is trying to achieve, and he was asking. But it's also very important to notice that through the means of the same framework, we have started developing a lot of more integration with a very high pace. We are releasing new integration every week. And we have added these scripts or in the library available directly on the Domotz web app. So if you go to the Domotz web app under the integration and automation scripts, you will find the libraries of integration that we have developed. Keep an eye on the release notes because we will add more and more integration every single week. So once per month we will announce, but basically every week there will be new scripts available there. Just to give an example, I did write 35 lines of code to monitor Tesla charger. I was curious to know the temperature of the handle because it kind of gets very hot here. So I was able to monitor the temperature with 35 lines of code, which are pretty simple. JB, you have probably another example, and Bobby has thousands of more examples there.
Yeah, and Bobby, here's the question for you, right? I know you've gone in and developed your own scripts. You've also developed scripts for some of our customers because they had a specific need. I can think of one where you did a machine-to-machine latency testing or something. I mean, first of all, speak to where you see the value of these scripts, and then talk about what we can do for customers.
Yeah, I think with this feature, it really should be thought of as kind of like an extensibility feature. If Domotz doesn't do one little thing you need, then this feature is a way to do that. And I think with a lot of the different devices out there, there's so many different APIs that users can leverage to gather more information or perform actions, whatever it may be. But it's a way to basically expand the capabilities of Domotz to be a better fit in just about any possible use case out there, because you can get it to integrate and talk to so many different things. And to be completely honest, I'm not a developer. I hardly know any programming languages, and I've just honestly really just been using ChatGPT to do all of it.
We had to bring AI into the conversation. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. And the one that you brought up, the latency tests, was kind of a fun one, because we had a user a few months ago. He asked, can Domotz run a command on this workstation to ping these IPs and tell me latency and packet loss value and the status of those IPs? And so I worked with him to understand exactly how he wanted us to do it. And it took a little while because I was new to ChatGPT, but eventually we had a script that I applied to his Windows workstation, gave it a list of IPs to ping, and then he has a table with all those metrics. So even if you're not a developer, don't know JavaScript, just ask AI, and eventually you'll be able to get the answer.
I have to admit, I started writing this script for this air quality sensor. I did the same type of thing, right? And ChatGPT did an amazing job of pointing me in the right direction. I did have to rely on Enrique to finish it up for me, but he did a great job. So, okay.
I'm out. I'm a cheater as well. I asked ChatGPT to write the code for script, not about cheating, but speaking about custom script. I want to introduce Lorenzo, that was able to join the webinar, just to introduce to everybody on the line today. Lorenzo, welcome.
Hi, Lorenzo.
Hi everyone.
Welcome, my friend. I'm glad you made it and you're okay. This is good.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Thank you.
Lorenzo, I told them that you help cover kind of our European region, help with onboarding and talking to customers. We're at the end of our webinar, but I'll give you some time here. Of all of the types of questions that you get, especially in the European area, like what's kind of the #1 question that you often address that you think everybody on this webinar should know about?
I don't know if you have already addressed that, but mainly the difference between monitoring root networks and VLANs. That's the most common question that we get. Did you already address the subject, or?
we did address it, but let's hear from your point of view. I mean, Bobby talked about, the attached networks versus subnets, and we kind of related it to VPNs, right? Dealing with that, but how do you address that with customers?
Basically, I, guide them, say to, sorry about that, say to actually understand where are they deploying Domotz, and basing on their case scenario, if they have VLANs and they have plugged in their Domotz agent into a trunk port, which is able to see all these VLANs, they can configure on the operating systems the agent runs on specific virtual interfaces to be able to scan those VLANs at layer 2. And because of that, they will be able to get the MAC address, and device identification will be performed by Domotz immediately. And also they will be able to get port mapping. And because of that, they will be seeing the network topology also on those VLANs. Instead, if they do configure them as rooted networks, which is not I would say the most appropriate way of doing that, they will be getting IP addresses that would be seeing those devices, but they would not be able to get layer 2 information, which is really important to get them those networks attached to the main network and get a broad overview of their site.
Yeah, Lorenzo, what you're saying there, and I think it's good to highlight this, right? If you're doing routed network checking, it physically works, right? We will see the IP addresses, but one of the core values of Domotz is the asset discovery and the classification, right? That classification happens because we see MAC addresses, and we can enrich that data based off of not only, the standard manufacturer identification that happens at the front of the MAC address, but also because we have a database of over 30 billion devices that we can then really enrich and say, okay, it's not only this manufacturer, but it's this make, it's this model, right? So I think that's a powerful tool. And we can only do that through those attached networks or VLANs. So that's good.
Yes. Also, there is another very important thing that we can do by leveraging on layer 2 information. So as you know, the ID of each device, it's its MAC address. On rooted networks, instead, we'd only have an IP address. So if on those on those rooted networks, on those layer 3 networks, there is a DHCP enabled. So the IP addressing is given dynamically by a server. We are not able to see if that device is really that device, because its IP can change.
Yep, that's a very, very good point. We are running out of time, but there's one question that came in that I want to ask. And Lorenzo, I'm going to throw it to you just because you joined us late, okay? The question is about moving data from one agent to another. So let me clarify what I think I hear. We showed at the beginning that we have 16 or 18 different agent types. And let's say somebody starts with a Windows agent, but then they want to move to that data that they've collected to the Protectly box, or maybe they want to start it up on a Domotz box or another virtual machine. Can they do that, and how do they do that? I think it's a very good question, because sometimes also hardware breaks and they need to migrate it to another machine, so another host. How do they do that, Lorenzo?
So good news is that all the data you can see, in Domotz is hosted onto Domotz Cloud. So basically, they will be able to migrate self-service migrate the agent from a platform to another. They just have to install another agent. Then there is a link when they do connect it to the Domotz collector. And first, after that, they can click on, instead of activating a new agent, they can click on migrate, the migrate link, and they would then be able to choose which agent they want to migrate to.
Yeah, and I bet I bet we have. This could be bad. Here I am doing a test here. Oh, look at that. There is a help article, right, on how to do this, and it probably has exactly this that you're talking about, right? So
start migration link, definitely. Then they can search for the if you just scroll down, JB, a little bit, they will be able to see, you know, the agent they want to migrate. They select them, then click migrate your agent, and then that's it.
Yeah, perfect.
2 minutes migration.
Yeah, we made it easy, which I applaud the team for doing. So, okay, we are over our time. Lorenzo, I'm glad you got to join us. I wish that our audience could have heard more from you. But Giancarlo, you did an okay job filling in, man. So, and Bobby, thank you very much as well. I want to say a couple things to the audience here. One is, as always, and we talked about this, take advantage of help.domotz.com. Take advantage of our onboarding guides. If you liked this session, let us know. I think we're going to try to do more of these Ask the Experts type of webinars, and we can get into some specific topics if we need to. So just let us know what you want to see. And of course, our support team is always there to help you. So support@domotz.com via email, and we will be happy to help you guys, whether it's onboarding, setting up your account, or just general questions, like Bobby mentioned in the webinar as well. If you need help integrating some of the different services with Domotz, let us know. Or even if it means, you know, helping you with some of the custom scripts and you want to do a little bit more of interrogation of specific devices, we're there to help you. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you again at the next one. Thank you.